Welcome to my Primary Languages CPD series, Part 7, the Programme of Study, Reading and Writing. My name is Claire Seckham and I'm a languages teacher and an independent consultant. You can read more about what I have to say about primary languages on my blog, and you can see its URL here. Also, any resources that I show you, you'll be able to find on my website, which is called Lightbulb Languages. So our big question is, what does the programme of study say about reading and writing? In the last part of this series, I discussed how oracy, or listening and speaking, prepares children for literacy, or reading and writing. Our learners understand language when they are listening and reading, and they produce the language via speaking and writing. Listening, speaking, reading and writing together comprise the four modalities of language. This is the term coined by the Ofsted Curriculum Research Review, which was published in 2021. Previously, they were known as the four skills. As stated in Part 5 of this series about the three pillars, we use activities in the four modalities to teach our three pillars of vocabulary, grammar and phonics. This is the programme of study for Key Stage 2 foreign languages, which dates from September 2013. It's this version of the curriculum that we're going to discuss here. We will see a revised curriculum in 2027 as a result of the Curriculum and Assessment Review, which was published in November 2025. We need to read the programme of study closely to pull out the statements about reading and writing. Let's start with the purpose of study, which is the first section of the programme of study document. The first reference comes in this sentence. The teaching should enable pupils to express their ideas and thoughts in another language and to understand and respond to its speakers both in speech and in writing. This is stating straight away that oracy and literacy are of equal importance. This has been a somewhat contentious issue for primary languages in the past. Some say that we should focus on speaking and listening, especially as the children are just young learners and emergent readers and writers in English. Children certainly view only writing as work in their language lessons. They will often say that they enjoy language because they don't have to do any work. However, we know that they are working hard on their phonics, speaking and listening. In 2021, Dr. Michael Wardle, the former Languages Lead Inspector for Ofsted, published a blog post about languages in outstanding primary schools. Talking about the four modalities, it says, sometimes schools had a structure linked to developing listening, speaking, reading and writing. Sometimes there was a belief in not engaging in written forms of the language at all. This implies that this belief is incorrect. Writing is a way for children to consolidate what they know, to provide you with some evidence of their learning, and of course to use the language that they have learned to create something that is often personal to them. The following sentence refers to the communicating for practical purposes that I discussed in the last part of this series with reference to speaking and listening. It refers to reading great literature in the original language. First of all, it's worth pointing out here that the programme of study is the same for Key Stage 3 as it is for Key Stage 2. And it's a lot more reasonable to expect that Key Stage 3 age children will have the level of language and emotional maturity to read this great literature. What would count as great literature for Key Stage 2? Well, we often use children's books that have been translated into Spanish, such as The Hungry Caterpillar, or children's books that we have found that were originally written in the target language, such as the Trotro series for French, for example. The next mentions come in the aims, which is the second section of the programme of study. The first statement says that all pupils should be able to understand and respond to written language from a variety of authentic sources. So children have to understand and write an appropriate response to language that they have read. Authentic sources for reading could be children's storybooks, non-fiction books, poems, texts from the internet, magazines, newspapers, publicity material from shops and so on, adverts, leaflets, posters, letters, maybe even letters and emails from children in schools in another country. The next relevant statement says that we need to ensure that all pupils can write at varying length for different purposes and audiences using the variety of grammatical structures that they have learned. Bear in mind, first of all, that this is the end of Year 6 picture. Children will not be writing at varying length throughout Key Stage 2. In the 2005 Key Stage 2 Framework for Languages, an obsolete but still useful document, reading and writing are put together as literacy. It's still useful to look at this document to see how literacy is built up over the 4 years of Key Stage 2. We can expect children to be operating at word level in Year 3, phrase level in Year 4, sentences in Year 5, and short texts in Year 6. The different purposes and audiences might include writing to a friend their age, writing information about their town for others to read, or writing for the school newsletter or website, even perhaps for children in schools elsewhere in the UK or in a school in another country. In order to write coherently and successfully, they will have to use the grammatical structures that they have learned, but I would argue that they wouldn't get very far without also the vocabulary that they have learned, and they would also want to include more personal vocabulary that they have found for themselves in a dictionary. The final aim is that we should ensure that all pupils discover and develop an appreciation of a range of writing in the language studied, and this refers of course to reading. Realistically, children will experience reading first-person and third-person narratives, information and non-fiction texts, and then also poems, rhymes, song lyrics, and short stories written in the language. Moving on to the subject content next, which says that teaching should provide an appropriate balance of spoken and written language. So this is stating again that the oral and the written skills are of equal importance, but their use in the sequence of learning needs to be carefully considered. As I discussed in the previous part of this series, speaking and listening in the languages classroom are vital for building confidence and understanding prior to writing. Reading and writing are supported by and then reinforce the speaking and listening. Oracy is a foundation for later literacy. As James Britton said, reading and writing float on a sea of talk. It also says that children should be able to understand, so read in this case, and communicate in writing, ideas, facts and feelings in speech and writing focused on familiar and routine matters, using their knowledge of phonology, grammatical structures and vocabulary. So for the facts, it would be things like saying your name, saying your age, describing yourself, talking about your family, saying what the weather is like, saying the date, talking about your town, talking about your school and giving the prices of things. For feelings, it would be saying how you feel, giving your opinions of things and reasons for those opinions, and talking about your likes and dislikes. And all of these are commonly seen in Key Stage 2 schemes of work for languages. The role of phonology or phonics alongside grammar and vocabulary is especially important for reading and reading aloud. Children need to be able to use their knowledge of phonics and the sound spelling link to read aloud confidently. The final point in the subject content is about ancient languages, which of course are an option in Key Stage 2. Children learning an ancient language will not be expected to write in it, and it's expected that the focus will mostly be on reading and understanding. There then follows the list of attainment targets. Bear in mind again that these all represent the end of Year 6 picture. It starts off by saying that children should be taught to link the spelling, sound and meaning of words, and this again shows how closely linked phonics and reading are. The sound spelling link is crucial to being able to read aloud confidently and accurately. This theme is continued in a further target which says that children should be taught to develop accurate pronunciation and intonation so that others understand when they are reading aloud. The next point says that children should be taught to read carefully and show understanding of words, phrases and simple writing. Again, this is the end of Year 6 picture, so children in Year 3, for example, will not necessarily be reading simple writing, but will be focusing instead on single words and maybe short phrases. To show their understanding, children might complete simple comprehension questions or multiple choice questions. Stories, songs, poems and rhymes have a prominent role in the Key Stage 2 programme of study, and the next target says that children should be taught to appreciate stories, songs, poems and rhymes in the language. It's sometimes tricky to find appropriate materials to use for the language that we teach, that is the right level, and which contains the vocabulary that we are teaching. This is where our personal learning networks come in useful, so that we can exchange information about the stories, songs, poems and rhymes that we have used and which children have enjoyed. Next, it says that children should be taught to write phrases from memory and adapt these to create new sentences to express ideas clearly. We can't expect children to be able to commit the form and the spelling of a new word to memory immediately. We'll have to carry out some classroom activities that will help them to memorise the forms and the spellings of words. They will need to have experience of writing those words multiple times to build the muscle memory. It's also quite common for English to interfere with spelling in the new language. For example, in French, rouge, R-O-U-G-E, might sometimes be written R-O-U-G-H, because the OUGH cluster is pretty common in English and the OUGE cluster is extremely rare. Similarly, the MOS verb ending on Spanish verbs might be replaced with MOUS, as this is much more common in English. Children also need to be taught explicitly how to adapt the phrases and sentences that you have been teaching them in order to say what they want to say. In order to express themselves, they will rarely have to begin composing completely from scratch. There is usually something that they can adapt or build on. The final point says that pupils should be taught to describe people, places, things and actions in writing. So for people, we're talking about themselves, parts of the body, family members, friends, famous people and historical people. For places, the home, school, town and other countries. Things in the classroom, school subjects, animals, food and drink, colours and the seasons. And for actions, we're talking about things like sports, hobbies, going to different places and giving directions. Again, all of these are topic areas that are commonly covered by Key Stage 2 schemes of work. Another big question is, should children be writing in their books every lesson? In some schools, the expectation is that children will write every lesson in every subject. In language lessons, as I've already said, oracy always comes first, and new language is practiced via listening and speaking activities before formal reading and writing takes place. Depending on how long your lessons are, it's quite likely that you'll go several weeks without the children doing any formal reading or writing. There are, of course, other ways for them to demonstrate what they have learned and for you to record evidence of this. Writing should only take place once the phonics, listening and speaking has taken place and the children's understanding of the new vocabulary and grammar is secure. Ofsted says in its Curriculum Research Review for Languages that students should start using language creatively in speech and in writing over time and with practice. The building blocks, the small steps of learning, should be carefully sequenced and well practiced before moving on to the next step. Writing should only take place if it's going to help children to know more and remember more at that particular point in the learning, not to merely tick a box. No work in books does not mean that no learning has taken place. It's worth pointing out here that it is good practice for children to each have their own book for their language learning. It acts as not only a record of their learning, but also as a reference tool that they can use when they're doing independent writing or preparing independent speaking. They will be able to refer back to see what they're supposed to be remembering. The book can also contain useful tools like knowledge organisers and sentence builders, which will encourage children to become more independent and to reduce the number of questions asked to the teacher. We will delve further into primary languages in the next videos.